Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Courtroom Insider. I'm Nate Eaton, coming to you from Phoenix, Arizona. I hope you had a great Tuesday. There was no court today. Lori Vallow Daybell is continuing, I should say, to recover in her jail cell at the Maricopa County Jail, and we will see if she returns to the courtroom tomorrow. Well, she has to. I think Judge Boreski told her she's got to be there. In her words, drag me out of the cell. She's got to be there to report on her health. And let's hope that she is better and that we can continue on with this trial in the pursuit of justice for Brandon Boudreaux, the young man who was allegedly shot at, or who was shot at when he was driving home from the gym back in October of 2019. So glad you're joining me here. Please let me know where you're watching from and if you have any questions. We got a full show tonight, even though there wasn't any court. It often seems like on these days when it's kind of slow is when I get caught up, and hopefully we have some good content for you. Here's what we're going to talk about tonight. David Leroy is here. He's a defense attorney. Last night I had on a prosecutor, Rachel Smith. Now we're going to hear from a defense attorney. What is his thought? What are his thoughts about Lori Vallow Daybell's sickness? And what does the prosecution need to prove in order to win their case? And what does Lori need to do if she wants a chance at being found not guilty in this particular case? We'll talk with him. He's got a very impressive resume. Rich Robertson, the private investigator who Brandon hired after he was shot at, he's here. We're going to go in depth about the case, about what he learned, about his thoughts today. You won't want to miss it. We have an announcement. I've got an announcement coming up here that is Daybell related. I think you'll enjoy hearing that. Win a t-shirt. Yes, we're giving away a t-shirt thanks to newspapers.com, and anyone watching anywhere in the world can win. So there you go. You can win. And of course, we are going to answer your questions. So quick recap about where we stand today. If you're just tuning in for the first time, Lori Vallow Daybell jury selection was supposed to be finished last Friday. Opening statements were supposed to be done yesterday, Monday. But Lori went home sick on Friday. Monday came around. Yesterday, she showed up. She said she was too sick to continue. The judge gave her today to recover. And then tomorrow, we're back in court at 10 a.m. The jurors have been asked to come back. The potential jurors have been asked to come back. Assuming Lori is well enough or the judge comes up with a way to pick the jurors tomorrow, then the jury will be picked. And there will be 16 jurors, 12 regular jurors, 4 alternates. They won't know who's who until the end of the trial when it's literally like a lottery that's done. And then the case will proceed. So we could have jury selection tomorrow, followed by opening statements tomorrow afternoon, maybe Thursday morning, and then court will be held on Friday when originally it was not supposed to be held, and it will continue through into next week. That's where we stand. From all indications I have heard, Lori says she is still sick or was still sick today. And but hopefully she is again feeling better tomorrow. I imagine the judge has taken some steps behind the scene to make sure she's evaluated to see if she has any sort of diagnosis. And let's just hope that nobody else in the courtroom gets sick, especially her defense team, the prosecutor, the witnesses, the judge, and that this trial can continue as usual. Okay, with that, I want to jump over to my conversation with David Leroy. David Leroy is a defense attorney in Boise. I've interviewed him before. He was the Attorney General years ago. He has also been the Lieutenant Governor for the state of Idaho. Very experienced attorney who is very talented and very gracious. And I wanted you to hear his thoughts about Lori Vallow's case and what happens from here. All right, David, it's good to have a defense attorney's perspective on here to talk about Lori Vallow. And I want to ask you right off the bat, if you were her advisory counsel and she would listen to you, what advice would you give her at this point? 1, as far as her sickness, and 2, if jury selection does proceed.
Well, if jury selection is going to proceed per the judge's order, then it's certainly best not to compromise or complicate your case from the outset. And I would advise my client, Miss Lori, were she to continue to be legitimately ill, that it would probably be best if she gave we lawyers a list of the kinds of jurors that she would prefer, and that we went ahead and started the process on the day the judge dictates, in her absence, with her perhaps monitoring at long distance from the jail, and giving us a right to confer once or twice confidentially by jail communication before we make our final selections. It certainly would not be a good thing to entirely alienate the entire panel too many days in a row by bringing them back to the courthouse for no particularly good reason.
Interesting. So you're saying she could monitor and watch remotely from the jail as they do this jury selection, and then her attorneys are already armed with the type of questions she wants to ask.
Of course, I'm assuming that the connections would be available to do that.
Right.
But for the most part, those kinds of jail courthouse connections are readily available in every modern courthouse in the United States.
Right.
And the ability to communicate on final jury selection, which comprises just a very few minutes at the very end of an often very long interrogation process, is something that could be communicated in terms of counsel and client remotely, given her notes and the counsel's inclinations in a confidential setting. But given the fact that her prior jury selection was comprised pretty much of a 10-minute speech, the kind of thing that I'm suggesting, using the professionals in the way that we typically conduct voir dire selection, drawing out more about the personality and the history, the inclination of the jurors, rather than just giving two or three broad questions or a little 10-minute speech, would probably be more effective in selecting a potentially objective jury than anything Lori could do herself, healthy or sick.
She seems to kind of enjoy the spotlight, or at least not mind it in the previous hearings. She says she doesn't like
But
cameras.
you're the guy that thrust her in the spotlight. I don't know
Well,
why you think sticking a camera in her face in Hawaii would incline her toward that
I
situation.
don't know if she enjoyed that moment, I will say, but the rest of the moments, how much is theater in these type of trials? High profile court TV's there, everybody's talking about it. She shows up in a wheelchair yesterday and it makes headlines. I mean, how much do you, and as a defense attorney, do you want a little bit of theater to kind of tell your story and move the case along?
Well, I presume, and let's presume for purposes of this discussion,
Right.
that she really does have a malady. Something about what she did say rang true to me in that regard, and that was namely that she'd made complaints and requests to the jail authorities, and they had not promptly responded back to her with regard to objectifying her illness. Nobody took her temperature. Nobody reported that she had the symptoms of XYZ. She was not supporting that in the courtroom. And where she's had this history for a couple of 3 days, there should be some kind of jail analysis from the medical personnel there that either substantiates and confirms or undercuts what she's telling the court. So, assuming, as I do, that she is ill, and assuming that the jail is just operating on standard procedure, they're not a drop-in pharmacy, they're not a drop-in medical clinic where everybody's seen in 10 minutes and an instantaneous analysis is had. I'm presuming, therefore, that her utilization of a wheelchair yesterday was probably an alleged confirmation of her personal felt weakness or inability to conduct herself in an appropriate gait without uh, being weak or dizzy or something else, symptoms that she reported. So I'm not necessarily assuming that her use of a wheelchair was an aggrandizement for TV, but I do think that she may be, of course, as some defendants do, and occasionally some lawyers do, uh, reporting that the symptoms are more aggravated at a time when it might be uncomfortable or inconvenient to start a difficult process. But she does need to report for work. After all, it's her trial, her counsel, and her situation. It will go forward, and I would expect the judge will probably start jury selection with or without Lori here on the next scheduled occasion.
Mm. Yeah, I do wonder if you have to, as a judge, be careful when she's representing herself, as far as giving her enough chances if she really is sick, but then it gets to a point kind of like parenting, right? With your kid. If they say they're too sick for school, but they can go to a concert that night, you gotta lay it out. So let's hope that the jury selection happens tomorrow. Opening statements get underway tomorrow or the next day. This is a conspiracy to commit murder case, and the alleged victim is alive. What does the prosecution have to prove, Dave, to make this jury find a conviction? And what does the defense need to do to try to persuade them that Lori was not the culprit?
Well, attempted anything means the job didn't get done. And in attempted murder, it's always easier to prove if there's an injury or if there's some kind of impactful situation, which, but for the course of medical heroics, would have accomplished the homicide. So, in terms of an attempted homicide here, where the victim is not reported to be deceased and is available to testify, whatever acts are alleged collectively against that individual have to clearly signal that there was an intent to kill that person and that there was a premeditation, a deliberate attempt to kill that person. It didn't occur in the course of a fight. It wasn't the result of negligence. It was intended to be a homicide, and but for something else, it was not accomplished. The conspiracy element then means that there are two or more people who acted in combination to attempt to accomplish that activity. And that is often proved by communications of one type or another, the proximity of people at a critical time, the payment of a emolument or a money for some kind of activity. All of that together can constitute a conspiracy to accomplish a particular purpose. If I'm the prosecutor, I've got a complicated case on my hands to try to show all of those elements, the extent to which Lori may be personally, centrally involved in that, I'm unaware of in the instant case, but presumably by virtue of emails or telephonic communications, proximity at critical times, the prosecutor will be able to show and allege and argue that Lori was the central figure in all of this, and the conspiracy evolved around and away from her. If I'm the defense lawyer, I would say we don't have a homicide here. This is not a situation where anybody attempted to commit homicide. All of this is speculation. There may have been some bad blood. There may have been some good blood. We've got relatives involved. This is much ado about nothing, and nothing happened here, would be my argument as a defense. Prosecution will still tell the story, focusing on this particular set of allegations only, that this woman was so depraved and had such a nasty inclination that she was able to do this desperate deed, acting through a third party whom she instituted to do that. And the defense is going to tell the story of no touch, no foul. There's no crime here.
Yeah. Well, we'll see what happens. This is the one case out of all of them that is different because the victim is alive. The rest of the cases, we didn't have the victims alive, and they had pretty strong evidence. And we'll see. David, anything you want to add?
No, Nate, it's always a pleasure to be with you, and I'm glad you're representing Idaho, East Idaho, the entire nation on duty as always in a Lori Vallow case.
Well, thank you. I'll represent the whole state, not just East Idaho. I'll take it all. And my thanks to David Leroy for chatting with me. He's always great to talk with. He's got the coolest office. If you go in, he really likes Abraham Lincoln, and he's got all this Abraham Lincoln decor around his office. It's very cool. So switching over from him to Rich Robertson. Rich is a private investigator based here in the Phoenix area. He first learned about Brandon Boudreaux when Brandon called him up after he was shot at and said, basically, I'm scared for my life and I'm scared for my children and I need help. And then Rich launched a private investigation. And Rich is a former journalist. Journalists are so smart, most of them, some of us, I guess. And he launched a PI firm after doing news, I think, for like 30 years. Anyway, we get into the case. He tells me about stuff that you may not have heard before about this case, and some of it will probably be brought up at the trial. Here is Rich Robertson. Rich, why don't we start with how did you meet Brandon? How did you get involved in this case?
Well, Brandon reached out to me back in October of 2019. He contacted us, said he needed some help, wanted to meet with me on a weekend, and so went down to my office on a Sunday, and he came in and just started telling this incredible story of cults and murder and just bizarre stuff, and I was having a hard time actually keeping up with what he was trying to tell me. He was clearly anxious and fearful. He had just been shot at, and he was convinced that somebody might try again, and he was in danger. His kids were in danger, and he didn't know what was going on and where it was going to come from. So he was looking for help.
So this was just a matter of days after that attempted shooting on his life.
Yeah, I think it's well, like maybe a week or so later, he didn't feel like the Gilbert police were doing enough and quickly enough. And
And
so
at
he
the,
was out.
at the time, did you all know, did he know that JJ and Tylee were missing?
No. We knew that, I mean, my focus at that point was finding Brandon's wife, Melanie, finding Alex Cox, and finding the Jeep, because those were everything involved in the shooting against Brandon.
Right.
So I did. I found Alex and Melanie together, loading up furniture at a house that Melanie had been renting, and they loaded it up in this U-Haul. I never saw the Jeep because, as it turns out, it was already in Rexburg. And so, I knew about the kids in those first conversations, and I knew about Kay Woodcock, and I knew that had not had contact with the kids, and it was just sort of added to the story. At that point, Charles Vallow had been dead for a couple of months, and he was convinced that that was a murder, even though the local police were viewing it more as a self-defense. So he wasn't getting his satisfaction. He really didn't know what was going on.
Now, as a
So
private
yeah,
investigator, at that point, what do you do? Because it seems like it's a complicated story. Your
right.
client almost lost his life. At that point, no one knows if the kids are dead or alive or whatever, and you're focused on Brandon's case. How did you begin that initial investigation?
Well, the first thought was just to try to find Melanie, and I knew that she had this rental house, so I went to that neighborhood and just started talking to neighbors and leaving my card. And I checked out the house. It looked like somebody had just left. There was still towels hanging on the fence out by the swimming pool. There was some kids' bikes there, and it looked like somebody had just gone grocery shopping. There was no car in the garage. The garage door had windows, and I could see in there. There was no car, and the neighbors were telling me that they hadn't seen her in a couple of weeks. And so I just left my car. Said, if you see anything, let me know. Then I made contact with Melanie Gibb because I was aware from what Brandon said that Melanie Gibb was part of that small group of people with Lori and Melanie Boudreaux. And so I went and knocked on Melanie Gibb's door, tracked her down, and told her I was looking for Melanie Boudreaux. And she said she didn't know anything about it, told me to leave, basically. Wouldn't talk to me anymore. I slipped my card under the security door, and I left. I assumed, just based on her reaction, that she was on the phone with Melanie before I ever even hit the end of the sidewalk.
Mm.
It was just that kind of reaction. So I figured at that point the word was out that I was looking for people. And then I found, I was out on Halloween trick or treating with my grandkids, and I started getting phone calls from the neighbors saying there's a U-Haul backed up to Melanie's house. So that's when I went headed down there. And that's when I saw Alex and Melanie together loading furniture. And that lasted into the next day. They came back and loaded more. They left a bunch of stuff out on the curb, a bunch of kids' toys and clothes with a little cardboard sign on it that said free. And that was kind of creepy. I followed them to a restaurant and watched them, kind of sat at a table next to them and watched them interacting. They seemed pretty stressed. I followed them to Zulima's house. That's where they were staying. They parked the U-Haul outside of her house. They stayed there overnight. And they took a weird kind of trip up east of Phoenix the next day, came back and stashed the U-Haul in a parking lot outside of a sporting goods store for a day. And I was actually sitting in the parking lot watching that U-Haul when they showed up. Alex and her showed up in her car, and they got out. Alex got into the U-Haul carrying a duffel bag, military-style duffel bag, and she got back in her car, and they drove off and headed straight to Rexburg.
Wow.
Yeah,
So is that kind of the first sign or signal you had that they're moving to Idaho?
Yeah, we knew that Lori had already moved up there, and presumably with the kids, and that's what Kay was saying. And of course, the trick there is the reason I knew that they were headed to Rexburg was while they were loading the furniture into that U-Haul, I slipped a GPS unit onto that U-Haul. And so I was watching everywhere they went. And but the scary part was that Brandon had left Arizona with the kids and gone to his parents' house outside of Salt Lake City. So we knew that Alex and Melanie were running around knocking on doors all over the Phoenix area at former friend's house looking for the kids. She even posted on social media offering a reward for information about where the presence of her kids. But Brandon was hiding them. Now they're in a U-Haul headed straight in that direction. Watched them head out of Arizona, straight north to Flagstaff, across the border. We had no idea if they had gotten information and maybe headed toward Brandon and the kids. So it was like air traffic control from here. I was on the phone with the American Fork Police. We had vehicle identification. I had pictures of everybody. I knew what the license plate was. I knew about Alex's criminal history. I provided all this information to the American Fork Police, and they were ready. They were positioned all over the place. And then we, on GPS, watched them drive right straight past. They were within a few miles of the house where Brandon and those kids were. And they kept going. They never stopped. They stopped once at a yogurt shop south of Salt Lake, but otherwise kept right on moving. And right through Salt Lake, I had an investigator physically following them through Salt Lake City, all the way to the Idaho border.
Wow.
And then they just kept going. Now, once they got to Rexburg, they went right straight to the apartment or that townhouse complex where we knew that at that point we knew that Lori was there. So it was clear they were all getting together there. That's when Kay asked about the kids. At that point, up to now, I'd been looking for adults, but Brandon had talked to Kay about what we were doing, and so then we turned our attention to trying to find the kids. And I had contacted a retired FBI agent I knew up in Pocatello who started poking around up there and scoping things out and trying to find the kids. He went to JJ's school, talked to his school principal, I believe, and we found out that the kids had just not been seen.
Yeah.
And so it was just after a discussion, they decided to contact Rexburg police and ask for that welfare check. And that's when everything changed.
Right. Yeah, JJ had gone for a few days, I believe, and then Lori pulled him out saying she was going to homeschool him. Did Brandon believe from the beginning that it was Alex who tried to shoot him out of that Jeep?
Yes, Brandon Brandon believed it was Alex.
And
And
did you believe, or did you know how intricately involved Lori was in all of it?
no, I mean, frankly, the person in any of these kinds of cases, you always ask who benefits. And in this case, it was clearly his wife, Melanie. She wanted the kids, and he had $1 million life insurance policy. And he knew that Charles Vallow had $1 million life insurance policy, and that Alex Cox had just killed him. Uh, During all this, also, shots were fired at Tammy Daybell,
Right.
and then she died in her sleep while all this is going on. So now we got people just dropping dead, and the kids are missing, and there's insurance stuff going all around. But really, our focus was on Melanie at that point, and thinking that she would be the one that would benefit. She was under the influence of Lori. There was no doubt about that. And you knew that they were all together up there. So it just sort of looked like one large conspiracy. And as to why, Alex didn't have any beef with Brandon directly, but he was the guy who pulled the trigger on Charles. He recognized the Jeep because he knew that was Charles' Jeep that Charles had given to Tylee, and had Texas plates on it still. That Jeep showed up on some license plate reader cameras around town prior to that shooting. And then it was just kind of this circumstantial situation that really kind of pointed to it being Alex driving that Jeep.
Do you remember at what point when you realized, wow, Lori is involved in all of this, or at least, leading it, or whatever her involvement is? Or was that kind of a gradual thing as you're learning step by step?
Well, I mean, we knew that she was involved in Charles' death.
Mhm.
That was pretty clear, and it was a heck of a coincidence that Tammy Daybell died at that time, and so it just looked like this group, that they had plans. These dark spirits were being eliminated, and so that's who was doing what, who was pulling the strings. That was not clear. Was it really Chad? Was he the cult leader, if you will, or was it Lori? Was it them together? How many people were involved in this thing? We really didn't know. It was There was a lot more questions than there were answers in those early days of it. But uh, Charles had left a lot of information before he died. He was so worried, so uh, convinced that he was going to be killed that he changed the life insurance policy so that Lori couldn't get it, and then he gave all of his account information and passwords and everything to Kay Woodcock. Well, she shared those with me, and I started monitoring the Amazon account. And that's when we saw him buy these wedding rings, the infamous green jade,
The Malachite.
the malachite, before Tammy Daybell was dead. They were buying these rings, and in fact, they bought a man's ring and a woman's ring, and she returned the man's ring because it was the wrong size,
Mhm.
and had to get another one. But she was using Charles Vallow's Amazon account to buy all this stuff. And she was listing the address in Hawaii for the stuff to be sent to. So we were sort of from a distance. I mean, we were monitoring all of this movement, and of course passing information on to law enforcement as it developed. And then of course the Jeep, Rexburg police found this Jeep at that complex and took it into custody. It was being sought by Gilbert police, so there was a law enforcement cooperation there. And we found it very interesting that none of that group reported that Jeep being stolen. It
Right.
was in custody of Rexburg police, but they didn't call anybody to say, "Hey, our Jeep's missing out of the garage up here."
That's a good point. Yeah. You'd think you'd call the police if you woke up one morning and your car is not in your driveway.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. And it wasn't. So that was kind of an interesting. We were kind of laughing about that a little bit, but
So when all this is happening and no one's quite sure of who's where or no one's been arrested and people are worried for their safety, what do you tell Brandon? I mean, what do you advise your client to do? Because he's got to live day to day.
yeah, well, he was definitely in hiding. Basically, it was lay low. Our best bet was to keep an eye on where everybody was. It's and and of course we knew that Lori and Chad had taken off to Hawaii. We knew about the wedding in Vegas, where everybody got married all at once, and so we were just kind of keeping an eye on them. But she did find out. She showed up at that house where Brandon and the kids were staying. This was at Brandon's parents' house. She showed up there, almost got herself killed. She was in the garage, and Brandon's dad walked out in the garage to find this person standing there. He heard noises.
You're talking about Melanie.
I'm sorry, Melanie. Did I say
Yeah.
Lori?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, Melanie was in the garage. So she found out. And Alex was parked in the just down the street. Melanie got charged with trespassing on that incident.
She came to
So
get her kids.
yeah, she came to get the kids. She'd been after the kids the whole time. And then of course all of this stuff gets laid out in the divorce proceedings that Brandon filed, and that became a big deal because he was laying out this potential conspiracy that he believed still at that point that Melanie was a co-conspirator at the very group was he was in danger and his kids were in danger, and that was the argument he was making in his divorce action in court here in Phoenix to get sole custody of the kids. All of this religion stuff became a part of that case, and it was touted. It became a very aggressive case. Melanie had attorneys that held a press conference and blasted Brandon, really, and got themselves in trouble with the state bar over how they handled that case. And so it did play out a bit. Even everybody's focused on these trials, these criminal trials against Lori, but a lot of this played out in those divorce pleadings.
Why do
And
you think Melanie hasn't been charged?
well, clearly there isn't evidence. The whole case is a conspiracy case, and it's circumstantial. So, Brandon believes that was the Jeep, and Brandon believes that Alex was in it. But they're really, unlike the shooting of Charles Vallow, where there's no question about who was firing the gun, really is, from a legal perspective, there is a question here. So it's just how sure is his testimony? How certain is he of that? So the circumstantial case to prove the conspiracy has got to be in some kind of communications that were going on between all these actors. It had to be, if Alex was in that Jeep, there had to be. That doesn't mean Lori. I mean, they could use location data from cell phone towers, for instance, but that wouldn't put Lori there. That would potentially put Alex there, but not Lori. And yet, so there had to be some kind of text messaging or something going on there. And I'm not privy to what the disclosures have been, even in this case, but there had to be some kind of communications between them that are specific enough that could be a reasonable inference could be drawn about what they were planning to do or had done. But obviously, Melanie is not a part of that. Whatever there must not have been sufficient evidence to suggest that she and Alex and Lori all conspired together.
And
Now,
so with Chad, you could say probably that Chad, that's why they're
yeah,
not charging him.
and we saw that in the Charles Vallow murder case, that there was text messaging that went on that linked all of these together. And I suspect more of that is going to come out in this particular trial, but it probably will not include Melanie. If she wasn't representing herself, if she had a defense team, um, this would be an easier case to defend than any of the others because it is a kind of a circumstantial and conspiracy case. Her defense team could be pointing at Melanie and could be pointing at Alex. And, unless there's something really tangible, some communication with Lori and Alex that put her in the driver's seat of getting rid of Brandon for whatever reason. Who knows? I mean, pure speculation on my part, but she was unable to collect the life insurance policy on Charles, but they knew that Brandon had a similar amount of money. I think that if they needed the money and they were already saying that Brandon was a dark spirit, that does sort of give Lori a financial motive
Right.
to go after Brandon, to help the cause, to finance the cause, if you will.
Well, in all of these trials, you'd think they really could have gone after Alex a lot more. He's not here to defend himself. He really did do the dirty work, quote unquote.
Yeah, and if anybody was, he should have been the boogeyman in this case.
Yeah.
He was the easy guy to blame. But the problem with Alex is he didn't have a motive directly. But the biggest problem is Lori herself lying to the police about where the kids were while they were missing. She wasn't out looking for them, and she deliberately giving diversionary information to law enforcement at the time that they're missing. That puts her smack in the middle of the conspiracy.
Rich, did you think the children were alive? Whoa.
Well, the longer that they were missing, the less likely it was. And given what was going on up there, it you get a little cynical after doing this for a long time, and all indications were that it was pointing that direction. And but you're always holding out hope. I think law enforcement knew fairly early on where the kids likely were. They were saying things like they had to wait till the snow melted.
Right.
So, I think there was some understanding or some belief that that's where they were going to find them.
Were you surprised just how horrific the murders were, the conditions of the children's bodies?
Oh yeah, what happened to those kids was horrifying. It was horrifying that they were murdered, but then to the brutality of the post-mortem kind of brutality was just horrifying. It's hard to fathom how anybody could do that to another person, let alone children they're related to. It is mind-boggling to. I don't know how you'd ever reconcile that stuff. It's even killing of Tammy Daybell was certainly bad. It was a suffocation, strangulation, whatever there, and then the shooting of Charles. Those are all pretty quick and rapid, but then this, you're dismembering and you're burning and wrapping them in plastic and burying them. It's just, oh man.
Yeah.
That's the part that is, I'm sure that Brandon and Kay and others wake up in the middle of the night with these images. It's just too horrifying and too painful to think about.
Yeah, when you've seen them, you don't forget them. Brandon really is lucky to be alive.
He's the only survivor in this thing.
Right.
If you think about it, he came very close. I mean, that bullet struck the window just above his head, and
I mean, had his window been down,
right,
anything. I mean, had he been an inch? I mean, you always go through these what if scenarios.
What ifs, yeah. But I mean, he was in the same situation as Tammy. She escaped death apparently
right
a few weeks before, and but they came back after her in a
Right.
different way. So could that have, I think that's one of the things that was really in Brandon's mind too, that this wasn't necessarily a one-off.
Yeah.
Uh, so it was definitely a scary time. And then to see them traveling toward where he was that day, when following that U-Haul all the way up, watching him going right toward that house where he was staying with the kids. That's there was some pucker time there. I was sitting in Phoenix watching the movements and coordinating with police and everything else, and we were holding our breath as to whether there was a confrontation coming.
Is it hard to believe that it's been almost 6 years since you started this?
That is the crazy part. Yeah, it is hard to believe. And once law enforcement was involved, I kind of, I stepped away from doing some active investigation on it because I didn't want to stomp all over law enforcement investigation. There was no purpose of that. You had multiple agencies involved at that point. Um, but we cooperated with them, and to the extent our information was helpful, I mean, it great. But then watching the whole criminal process uh, was kind of interesting just to watch from, because normally I do criminal defense work mostly. So I'm usually sitting at the defense table with people like Lori and
Mm.
Chad. And I kept watching all of this thinking, how would I defend this case? What would I be doing on their defense teams? And it, I was not impressed. I was just not impressed with what happened in Idaho, or certainly down here with her representing herself. But even in the Idaho cases, it seemed like there was a lot more they could have and should have done. But in challenging the forensics, uh, they did very little of that. But it was the right result. I mean, based on all the evidence, it's regardless of whether she had a better defense team and whether she had a good defense team down here instead of herself. I think she was going to get convicted regardless.
Yeah, do you think that we'll actually have a trial that begins this week?
you know, I don't know how sick she is. At a certain point, because of the problem with the jury pool, they've already sort of pared down the jury pool based on this group's availability to sit through certain dates. If this thing pushes into that July 4th time frame, then you're going to lose a whole bunch of prospective jurors. So there's a good chance that if she's sick more than a week or so, they may have to push this off into the fall.
Yeah.
It wouldn't surprise me.
I mean,
This
that's the
stuff
thought.
happens. This stuff happens. Yeah.
It does happen, and the jurors could come again on Wednesday, but like the judge said today, how much longer can you ask them to keep coming back? And then
Right.
you've got to schedule courtrooms. There's a whole lot more than just, okay,
Yeah,
push it
and
off.
there's other scheduling conflicts. I mean, the judge himself is scheduling his other trials around this one. The prosecutor's got other cases. I mean, there's so many moving parts to trials, and picking out trial dates that once you have a slot that you can drop one in, you do everything you can to preserve that slot, because it's going to screw up all kinds of things if you don't.
Well, as you said earlier, if it's going to happen where someone gets sick, I guess now is the ideal time rather than once it's started.
Yeah, because once you've started and paneled a jury, then prejudice attaches, and you have to declare a mistrial, and then lots of things change. At least at this point, it's just a matter of moving the schedule and bringing in a new pool, and the jury commissioner can certainly do that.
Right. Rich, can you give everybody a little bit of your background just so they understand how you got involved in becoming a private investigator?
Oh, okay. Well, I was a journalist for almost 30 years. I was an investigative reporter at the Arizona Republic. I was the head of the investigative team for about a decade. Went off and did television for about 5 years, and then after all those years, decided that kind of wanted to strike out on my own. So a guy told me about private investigations work, and I looked at that and thought, well, it's the same skill set. And so I did that. And this is my 25th year as a private investigator. So I did almost as much time as a PI as I had as a journalist.
No
And
wonder you're such a good interview.
um,
Now, tell me, is there anything in this trial that you're most looking forward to learning or hearing?
I guess it's that digital evidence that I'm not privy to what it is that puts Lori uh, in the conspiracy. Uh, I think it's going to be all that digital, the phone communications, maybe some cell tower location data. Um, that's probably more what's going to resonate with this. There's no real ballistics to do. There's no uh, trajectory because there's so many unknowns and frankly that stuff doesn't even put Alex at the scene. So I don't think they recovered any bullets that were forensically able to do any kind of analysis and link it to a suspect weapon, for example. Um, I don't know enough about and you may know this, as to what, if any, GSR was done on the Jeep, any gunshot residue, whether or not was done and whether it was consistent. That's another area that could be challenged from the defense perspective.
Good.
But it really, I'm very curious about the communications between Lori and Alex. I think that's going to be what's makes or breaks this case.
My thanks to Rich for being such a good interview and sharing all of that information for us. And we will see just what comes out as court begins, hopefully tomorrow. Okay, I have an announcement. If you follow me on Facebook or X, you probably saw this earlier today, but I'm so excited to share with you that I am going to CrimeCon with these gentlemen right here. Detective Lieutenant Ray Hermosillo from Rexburg Police, Colby Ryan, and I will be on a panel at CrimeCon discussing the case. And then we're going to take your questions if you are there at CrimeCon. CrimeCon is held the first week of September. It's like the 5th through the 7th, I think. It's in Denver this year. You can still get a ticket if you go to the CrimeCon website. I think it's just crimecon.com. Use the promo code EATON, EATON, and get 10% off a standard badge. At the same CrimeCon, Marcia Clark, for the first time ever, the OJ prosecutor, the OG, you could say. She has gone on to become a best-selling author. She's written countless books. It is going to be an amazing seminar, an amazing session. I'm going to be interviewing her in front of all of you. Again, Q&A. She'll be there to sign her books. And you can use that same promo code EATON to get 10% off your standard badge. I want to thank our sponsor, newspapers.com. I don't think you can see it. I'm wearing, here, I'll sit up a little bit. I'm wearing one of their t-shirts. They sent us, I met them. You know who else will be at CrimeCon? Newspapers.com. That's where I met them a few years ago, I think in Nashville with my wife, or maybe it was Orlando. We were walking through, they stopped us and they said, we're fans of Courtroom Insider. So they're among us. And they gave my wife and I some shirts and we wore them home on the plane. We're like, these are so comfortable. And they saw me, I posted something on Facebook a few weeks ago in one of their red shirts. They said, we have new shirts. We're going to send you one. So they sent me this nice blue shirt and it's so comfortable. And they want to give you guys some shirts. Before we do that, I want to let you know you can get a 7-day free trial right now, newspapers.com/Nate, or 20% off. If you want to go check it out, go to that website. Here is what we're going to do. They're giving away I'm not even showing you my graphics. I'm scrolling here. There we go. Let's go to this one. Newspapers.com/Nate, 20% off, and you can get a 7-day free trial. And they're giving away to 5 of you anywhere in the world. They can ship worldwide. They are a worldwide website. Here's what you need to do. Go to eastidahonews.com/news t-shirt or news t-shirt. News t-shirt. You're going to fill out a simple form. Your name, your address, your email, and what shirt size you want. That's it. We're going to announce the winners tomorrow live on Courtroom Insider. Peggy is going to pick the winners, 5 of you at random. might as well win a t-shirt. It'll be shipped to your house. No fees, no charge. Just a big thanks to newspaper.com for sponsoring us this time around during this trial. Okay, let's get to some shout outs and some questions. I got a really nice email today from a guy named Mark. Hi, Mark. He's in Dallas. His wife, Sarah, is a huge fan. I guess that Sarah has watched every episode from the beginning. They lived in Rexburg when all this was happening. This year for Mother's Day, her first Mother's Day, she's a new mom. Mark ordered her a shirt from East Idaho News, and now she is guilty too. So thank you so much. Congrats on your baby too, Sarah and Mark. Appreciate you all watching in Dallas, and it's probably just as warm in Dallas as it is here. Okay, we have some other shout outs. We have P. Barnes from Scotland. Sarah, another Sarah from Midvale, Utah. Thanks, Sarah. Shirley Barnes Fowler from Huntsville, Alabama. Tammy Diambara from Burley, Idaho. Rosemary Fisher from Tampa. Susan Duffy Mance from Royal Oaks, Michigan. Merle Mildred from Canberra, Australia. I've been there. Beautiful. Phyllis Lowe from Kentucky. Iva Hare from Easton, Maryland. Thank you all very much for watching. Also, special shout out to my friend Peggy, another Peggy, who's feeling a bit under the weather. Hope you are feeling much better, Miss Peggy. And to your questions. You all had some really good questions here. Nina, when you are researching a story, Nate, and encounter conflicting information from multiple sources, how do you determine what to trust or prioritize in your reporting? Oh, that's a good question. That happens. Generally, you'll take in all the information and then you'll try to verify it. If someone tells you that something happened that's pretty big, you would try to verify that with someone else, normally an authority, a police officer or a school principal, someone who has the authority, who generally is trustworthy and can give you authentic information. But there's been times I've been fooled. I may have shared this story before. One time I was called to a bus crash, and I got there with my photographer, and there was a bus that had hit a motorcyclist. And it was a school bus. It was right after school. And I was getting ready to go live. And a kid came over, a teenager, and said, I was on the bus. I said, oh, can I interview you? And I interviewed him live on the air. And he told me this crazy story of how they were riding and they hit the motorcyclist and he screamed and this and that. And then about 20 minutes later, the police came over to give us a briefing. And they started off by saying, fortunately, no children were on the bus. And I said, what? They said nobody was on the bus. I got scammed. And I should have verified before I went on the air with this kid. It was breaking news. It was happening. I then went back on the air and apologized for sharing that false information, said no kids were on the bus. So that is an example of where I could have been a little bit more careful. As far as prioritizing or trusting, I think you take all the information you can and you try to determine it. And it's not necessarily us saying it, it's somebody else saying it, but it's important that you give as accurate information as you can. And I always try to do that. And as I said, I've been wrong many a times, but that's what I do. Okay, we have Caitlin. Nate, what did you do on your day off? Were you bored? I wasn't bored. A friend from Idaho was here and we went and had lunch together. And I didn't feel rushed. And it was I'll be honest, the food was not that good. I'm just going to be honest. I won't say the name of the place. It was barbecue, and I think we got warmed up food from last night. It wasn't that good. And I've been to a few other barbecue places in Phoenix that have been amazing. This place, my friend liked the beans. I thought the mac and cheese was okay. I would not recommend it. Anyway, that being said, and then I did laundry, and I went and did a little bit of shopping for some clothes, and then I did some interviews here, as you saw, and I had to run to Best Buy to get some cables for our gear here because I want to, whatever's happened, we're having some glitches this time, and I don't know what it is, so hopefully we're fixed. But thanks for asking. I was not bored, but I'm ready to go to court. I don't sit still well. Judy from Manitoba, I'm wondering if the procedure for jurors will change this time, given the drama from the last trial. Nowhere near anyone at lunch after the trial, etc. I don't think so. I think that's just how they do it here, Judy. And I think that that's how it's always been. And maybe I could see perhaps when the trial's over, if they don't want to talk to the media, they send them out another door. Maybe, but I don't know if much else will change. When can the judge say enough is enough? I guess we'll see tomorrow. I guess we'll see if, like David Leroy said a minute ago, if he'll say, all right, I know you can't do jury selection, but your advisors will, and we'll have you join from the jail or something like that. Would be interesting. What's the theory behind why Brandon was shot at? Well, Ames asked this. I think you heard Rich say right there, he had $1 million life insurance policy. They wanted money. I think that's the theory, and I think we'll hear that from the prosecutor. Does the jury get paid for their time? If so, how much? Good question, Elizabeth. I think they get like $12 or $13 a day, and then they get reimbursed for mileage, about 70 cents a mile. However, if there is a hardship, they can request additional funding from the state. There is additional jury funding that is available. Do you know what Colby feels like regarding Joseph Ryan's death from Teresa? Colby and I haven't really discussed that on the record as far as I can recall, but I'll have to ask him. I'll have to get his thoughts. He may have discussed it on his channel. I'm just not familiar with it. Has Colby been present for all the trials? Janine asks. He came on and off during the last one. He testified in Lori's first one, but that was it. And then he came at Chad's for the verdict. And I don't remember if he testified in Chad's. I don't think he did. But so he has been to all of the trials, just not the full length of them. Did Lori lose a member of her advisory team from Emily? No, she didn't. And many of you have asked, you've noticed she's been sitting by the male, Robert Abernathy. Some days she'll sit by him. Some days she'll sit by Pamela Hicks. And then some days she'll sit by Anna, who's the paralegal. So there's 3 of them. And then her investigator, although we have not seen her investigator much this trial. Granted, we've only been in there like 2 days, so he could probably be there. But as far as I know, they're all still on the case. Will you remind us why a DEA agent is scheduled to be a witness from Denise? Good question. I don't know. I have no idea. There's a thought of maybe drugs were perhaps involved, or maybe there was some testing done. I don't know. We'll see. That should be an interesting part of the trial. Maybe you all have some theories. If so, let me know in the comments below. A couple nights ago, you interviewed a juror from before. Have you any idea if Lori made eye contact with her during the trial, and did she seem to recognize her when this woman attended her other trial as a spectator? Lori doesn't notice when she walks in, her back is to the gallery the whole time. The only time she might notice is if she turns around when she's questioning a witness and looks, which she doesn't do a lot. When she is wheeled out, she does look back. We did make eye contact the other day. She smiled at me, and I believe she made eye contact with this juror briefly. Lori quickly turns away. Lori keeps her head down. She keeps focused on what she's doing, other than the jurors who are in the seat when, they're actually, when she's speaking to them directly. Good questions, everybody. So tomorrow I'll be in court in the morning. I'll do an update in the morning. You can follow me on social media. Here is where I'm at. Nate Eaton Reporter on Facebook, News Nate Now on X, n.eaton on Insta, and then East Idaho News. And that is where I will post updates throughout the day and keep you updated. We'll also be doing updates on eastidahonews.com tomorrow. And on YouTube, if you're here on our YouTube channel, East Idaho News, any video that comes out from the court, we'll post there. And assuming a jury is picked in the morning, if opening statements happen tomorrow afternoon, we'll broadcast that for you. There's a 30-minute delay once that happens, once it starts. But again, I'll keep you posted on that. We'll send out alerts, and we'll be back here tomorrow night, Courtroom Insider. I hope you are too. Thanks for spending your night with me. That sounds a little weird. Thanks for being here tonight, and we'll see you tomorrow.